Hello, I'm Dr. Gustosky. Everyone calls me Dr. G. I am the owner of Oasis Dental Arts. In this video and slideshow, I want to show you what a root canal is. I also want to clear up some misconceptions that root canals are painful and that they're very costly. In this video and slideshow, I'm going to cover first, the anatomy of a tooth. This is done so you will better understand what happens to the tooth. Second, I'm going to cover what are some causes of why the pulp dies and how does it happen. Pulp is the nerve and its blood supply inside the tooth. We are going to cover what happens to the pulp and how it leads to an infection spilling out of the tooth and infecting the surrounding area. Third, I'm going to discuss how root canals are done. Fourth, I'm going to cover the other treatments that are needed to save the tooth after the root canal. Fifth, I'm going over what other treatment options are available if the patient does not want to have the root canal performed. And finally, I'm going to do a cost comparison of the different treatment options. I'm going to start by going over the anatomy of a tooth and the surrounding tissue. The crown of the tooth sits above the gums and is the part of the tooth that are visible inside the mouth. This is the part of the tooth you chew with. The outside of the crown is made out of a strong, non-porous protective layer called the enamel. Inside the enamel is a softer porous material called dentin. In the center of the tooth, there's a chamber called the pulp chamber. The pulp chamber houses the pulp, and as you remember, the pulp is the nerve and its blood supply. From the chamber, microscopic tubules extend outward all the way to the dentin enamel junction. These tubules are filled with small amounts of pulp. The root of the tooth sits in bone and are covered by the gums. Each root has one or multiple canals that connect the pulp from the bone up to the pulp chamber. Blood flows into each root from the bone up through the canal and into the chamber, providing nutrients to the nerve and the tooth. Any change to the blood supply can harm the pulp. Without blood supply, the tooth becomes brittle and is prone to fracturing. This is one of the reasons that every root canal tooth is crowned. Why does the pulp die? There are many reasons why the pulp can die. I will go over a few of them. Deep cavity is a number one reason why the pulp can die. Bacteria inside the mouth eat the same foods you do. The waste product is acidic, which drills microscopic holes on the outside surface of the tooth. The bacteria travel into these deep holes and continue to dissolve out tooth structure deeper and deeper into the tooth until they hit the pulp chamber. Once the bacteria hit the pulp, they infect it, and this leads to inflammation of the pulp. The pulp's blood flow is altered and the pulp loses all its defense mechanism, leading to its death. Another cause of the pulp dying is grinding. I've seen individuals grind their teeth right down to the pulp chamber. Bacteria will travel from the mouth into the pulp, and the same thing happens to it as above. Also, fracturing a tooth by clenching or by chewing on something hard can lead the pulp to die. Bacteria will travel through fractures, and if deep enough, will hit the chamber, leading the pulp to die. Trauma to the tooth can also cause the pulp to die. In trauma, bacteria are not involved. Trauma damages the blood flow to the pulp, causing it to die. There is not usually a bacterial infection associated with trauma. Patients are usually unaware of this unless the tooth turns dark. Finally, long-term mild irritations, generally chronic irritations, or short-term severe irritations, acute irritations, can cause the pulp to die. It is rare, but I've seen it happen. As an example, if you bleach your teeth too often or leave the bleach on for too long on the tooth, it can lead to severe irritation. That irritation can lead to the pulp dying. So in other words, if the bacteria from your mouth come in contact with the inside of the tooth through decay, fracture, or grinding, it will usually lead the pulp to die. Also, changes to the blood flow of the pulp can cause it to die. In this slide, we're going to cover what happens to the pulp when it gets infected and dies. There is a sequence of events and symptoms that the pulp goes through. Not everyone will have the same experience. There has been multiple times when a patient who has not seen a dentist in a long time arrives to the office with a swollen face, never knowing that there was anything ever wrong. One of the first symptoms to develop is cold sensitivity. A tooth is made up of multiple parts. The outer surface of the tooth is a hard substance called enamel. This is the most dense substance in your body. Bacteria eat the same foods you do, and the waste product is acidic, which start to dissolve the outer surface of the tooth. The bacteria then penetrate the tooth and continue to eat the foods present. As they penetrate deeper into the tooth, they start to feed off the tooth itself. Once the bacteria get past the outer layer and hit the inner, softer layer, called dentin, it is considered a cavity. The dentin part of the tooth, which project outwards from the pulp chamber. These tubules are actually filled with pulp tissue. Once decay has hit the inner dentin layer, the patient can experience cold sensitivity. Only a small percentage of patients get this sensitivity. As the decay moves closer to the pulp chamber, the more likely that the tooth will become cold sensitive. The cold conducts through the entire inside of the tooth, through the tubules and into the nerve. Bacteria travel deeper into the tooth, killing the pulp inside the tubules. They continue to travel into the tooth until it hits the center chamber. It roughly takes 3 years from start to when it hits the pulp. Slowly moving decay will likely not result in cold sensitivity because the nerve has time to adapt and desensitize, while fast and aggressive bacteria will likely lead to cold sensitivity. Sensitivity that lasts longer than 10 seconds is an indication that the tooth needs a root canal. Bacteria continue to travel to the pulp chamber and infect the pulp, causing it to start to die. The pulp becomes inflamed. The bacteria continue to eat anything in sight, and they create gases. Those gases increase the pressure inside the chamber. Hot liquids and foods consumed cause the gases created by the bacteria to expand. This puts pressure on the pulp, causing it to hurt. As the pulp becomes inflamed, it increases the number of signals to the brain. Once the number of signals pass a certain number, the threshold number, pain is felt. Oftentimes, the pain is a throb, like a heartbeat. As the heart beats, blood is forced into the tooth. The blood rushes into the tooth, increasing the pressure. The pulp becomes further crushed, increasing the number of signals to the brain. One of the ways of diagnosing a need for a root canal is if the tooth has spontaneous throbbing pain. As the bacteria travel down the root, it kills the pulp as it travels. Once the pulp, the tooth may stop hurting and stop being sensitive to hot. This is the calm before the storm. Bacteria will travel out of the ends of the root and start to feed off the bone and surrounding tissue. I often get asked if a patient can just take antibiotics to take care of the problem. The answer is no. Because since the tooth does not have a blood supply anymore, the antibiotics will never reach the affected site. Dentists only prescribe antibiotics to contain the infection. An infected pulp is a bacterial factory. Without antibiotics, the patient can develop a swollen face within hours. With a swollen face, it is unlikely that any prescribed antibiotics will be effective. Most oftentimes, I will send the patient to the hospital to get IV antibiotics. The antibiotics I can prescribe will take days before starting to work, and by then it is too late. Upper teeth can be especially risky because the bacteria can travel right up to the brain, infecting it. A patient shared a story with me. She lived outside the United States and she did not see a dentist for a while. She knew she had a cavity and she had not taken care of it for years. One day, she was not feeling well and went to the hospital. She ended up in a coma for 1 month. It was determined that her brain had become infected from the bacteria that came from her tooth. With high-dose antibiotics, she survived. Infections inside the mouth can become life-threatening if not taken care of ASAP. Have you ever heard someone say that their root canal was very painful? I frequently get asked that. Is it going to hurt? The answer is rarely. Root canals only hurt if you wait too long. Anesthetics are not as effective in infected sites because the anesthetic can become neutralized by the infection. In addition, the anesthetic may not be able to reach the site because the infection may basically be blocking where the anesthetic needs to reach. Thus, the patient will not get numb. No dentist wants to do a root canal on someone who does not. How are root canals done? We start out by numbing the patient. After a patient is numb, we place a rubber dam, which basically is a sheet over the mouth, preventing you from swallowing some of the products we use. We'll drill through the top of the tooth down into the pulp chamber. We make sure all the decays are removed in the process. The inside of the tooth is scrubbed all the way down the root with wire brushes and washed to get rid of all the bacteria and all the pulp left behind. The chamber is then filled down to the root end with a sappy material called gutta percha. Other treatments needed in addition to the root canal to save the tooth. In other words, a root canal is not enough to save the tooth. If the tooth is badly broken down and not enough of it remains, we have to use the roots to provide support for the structure above it. In other words, just like a building needs a foundation to support what is built above grounds, the tooth above the gums needs the same structure. We cement a metal rod inside one of the roots. This metal rod attaches everything above the gums to the roots. On the other hand, if there's enough tooth structure, we just fill in the hole without the metal rod. We call this the buildup. The crown is always placed on a root canal tooth to further strengthen it. The only exception are front teeth. Since the appearance of our front teeth are hard to match, we only crown front teeth after root canal if they are badly broken down or if they're badly stained. Are there other treatment options to a root canal? The answer is simple. The only other option is to extract the tooth. If you extract the tooth and want to replace it later, there's a couple replacement options. One, you can place an implant. Implant is a metal root that is placed in the area of the lost tooth. The bone adheres to the implant. After healing, you'll be able to place a crown on top of the implant. Second, you can place a bridge. Bridge is when you place caps on the adjacent teeth in the area of the lost tooth, and then you have a crown hang from the two adjacent teeth. You can also place a denture. Denture uses adjacent teeth and gums to support teeth. Dentures don't help you keep your teeth, it prevents you from losing them as fast. Final option is to leave the space empty. With empty space, the adjacent and opposing teeth shift. Since you can't chew properly in the missing tooth area, the opposing side deteriorates faster. In other words, keep the teeth you have for as long as you can, because nothing will replace it. The final slide is a cost comparison of different treatment options. We use a common dental insurance fees to estimate these numbers. Since costs and coverage are based on your employer's selection of different plans, availability, costs, and coverage differ for each employer. Costs are provided for comparison reasons only. The cheapest cost is to extract and leave the space alone. This option is, however, the most costly when you take into account the damage that it will lead to in the future. A denture and root canal and crowns have relatively the same cost. If you implant or bridge the tooth after the extraction, you're going to pay over twice the cost of the root canal and crown. So long term, keeping the tooth is the cheapest option unless you want to extract and leave the space alone, accepting the consequences of it. Hello, Dr. G here again. Hopefully this video and slideshow helped you better understand what a root canal is. If you continue to have questions, please feel free to give us a call at 858-271-1010.